Well, hello again. Jeff Cloud of Crossroads Reentry Ministries here with you for Sobriety Part 8 today. Sobriety Part 8. And most of you by now probably know a bit about me, know a bit about Crossroads Reentry Ministries, so I'll kind of do a little bit different introduction in the morning, but of course this morning, phone number 704-499-1332 or address Post Office Box 861, Huntersville, North Carolina 28070. Write us on the inside if you haven't got a good, safe, sober place to stay when you get out. Try to do that about 4 or 5 months out, bare minimum. The reason being is many times it might take 2 months or so just to get a place, writing back and forth, getting information, etc., so on and so forth. But of course we exist for no other reason than help people with God-honored needs who are trying to leave behind the lifestyle of incarceration, which of course includes addiction and alcoholism, etc. Now, feel free to call when you get out. That's key when you get out. Don't collect call from the inside. We don't collect calls from the inside. The reason being is, like I said the other day in a DVD, sometimes it's $2 for a collect call. Sometimes it's $22. There's no rhyme or reason, and we have to watch our P's and Q's being a small charitable organization, our pennies and our quarters per se. But give a call when you get out, any God-honored need, okay? Now, today, of course, is our final DVD number 8 in a series of 8 on sobriety. And we're going to talk about steps 6 through 12. We're going to kind of give you a bird's eye view of 6 through 12. But first, what I'd like to do is share with you my apologies today. If you look closely, you would see I hadn't shaved, but I haven't shaved because of a good reason. Where I'm currently filming this, right next door to us is a Home Depot. And I have to do a little maintenance on my plumbing, which meant this morning I had to cut the valve off at the street, pull the feeder supply line that went to the toilet, bring it with me because there's some specialized pieces I'm going to need that I can show them at Home Depot and get that. But if you catch it, that is normal maintenance that needs to be done in a house for a house to function properly. And it reminded me that one of the key things with these 12 steps of a recovery program, the big book actually says this. When we get through the steps, basically all we've got is a daily reprieve based upon maintenance of our spiritual condition. Did you catch that word? Maintenance. We got to maintain our spiritual condition. Just like if the highway department went out, built a road, and never maintained it. Imagine an interstate, never maintained it, didn't patch any potholes. After about 30 or 40 years, tanks couldn't even go over it if they had been driving it because it would be so rutted up. Just like a highway needs maintenance or a house needs maintenance to serve its function, so does our spirit man. We need to maintain. I got to thinking about some of that. How had I maintained my program through 20 plus years of sobriety? And I got to thinking, I said, holy smoke. I've probably read the Bible, been in the Bible at least a couple thousand or more times, maybe several thousand, 10,000 or more. But then the other thing, how many times have I prayed to God? Good gracious, hundreds of thousands, possibly over those 20 years. And how many times have I meditated about God's spiritual truths? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. And the maintenance, I believe, has been exactly what the big book said. I needed that maintenance because that maintains my spiritual condition. And as long as my spiritual condition is maintained, I stay sober one day at a time. You will as well too. Now what we're going to do today is we're going to take an overview of steps 6 through 12. But primarily what we believe is this, that in treatment centers or in prisons or jails, for the most part, and I know there could be some exceptions, but we believe if at all possible, get through those first 5 steps just like a treatment program does, because then when you get out on the street, the cravings aren't there, the jonesing's not there. It's easy to not drink or drug for us addicts, alcoholics, when the cravings are gone. And then what would we do on the street? We'd start working the program of either AA or NA, for example, with a sponsor. And we'd get a sponsor and work through the steps. But the point being that we want to get maybe through those first 5, if at all possible, on the inside, so the cravings and the jonesing don't hammer us down when we get out. We talked at length at the tail end of the last DVD, number 7 of 8 for sobriety, basically as to how getting that 5th step done, the cravings and the jonesing end. So I'll leave you at that with the first 5 steps, the importance of getting through. Now, the purpose of this DVD is just give you an overview, like I said before, a bird's eye view, if you will, of what's going on in steps 6 through 12. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to give you that bird's eye overview, so this ain't going to be a lot of time spent on each one of these steps. But I'll look at steps 6 and 7 together. They deal with our defects of character, our shortcomings, whatever you want to call them. They deal with our sin. Some people may call them our reoccurring sins, whatever they may be. There's a gazillion ways you can describe that. Basically, our brokenness. We're dealing with a lot of that. And of course, we want to get rid of that. That's basically what we're trying to do in steps 6 and 7. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Steps 8 and 9 is what's called the amends steps. They deal with making amends. Mend means to repair, of course. For example, mend a fence. Some of you in the nation, particularly out in the Midwest, know what the fences are and how the farmers will be mending those fences. And of course, it means to repair. It's the same way with the amends, key word being mends. We mend relationships and the damages that have been done in the past. And we make amends. We try to make things right if we can for the wrongs we've done in the past. Step 10 is what we call a spot inventory. Now remember, steps 4 and 5 are combined and called the inventory steps, and there's major work we do most of the time for a few weeks on those 2 steps. And we really concentrate, get the paper and pen out on step 4, we do all that stuff. Then step 5, we tell our deep dark secrets to another human. It's pretty deep and involved inventory. But step 10 is a spot inventory. And when things like this go on, we feel, we just step back and go, why am I feeling, why am I disturbed? Is it fear, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment? What is it? And we deal with it. We deal with it. It's called a spot inventory. It could be during the day. It could be at night. When we go to bed, how did we do today? We ask those similar type of questions. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. Step 11 is improving our contact with God. Boom, in a nutshell, improving our contact with God. If this is a spiritual program, we're going to need to improve our contact with God. If you're like me, the way I was out there in my drinking or alcoholic career, or maybe others for addiction career, we didn't really worry too much about or concern ourselves too much about contact with God, hearing from God, talking to God, that kind of thing. So step 11 is going to be dealing with that. Step 12 deals with basically this: carrying the message and practicing the principles of these steps. So carrying the message, basically we had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and that spiritual awakening is what keeps us from drinking or drugging. We share that message so other people hopefully can grab a hold of it and get the sobriety that we have. And then of course we practice these principles of these steps in all of our affairs. For example, step 10 says, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. Boom. We promptly admitted it. Sometimes that might be wrong with our children. We didn't quite respond correctly. I personally would say, hey honey, to one of my daughters, I did wrong here if I use that step. But that means practicing these principles in all our affairs, not just in AA or NA, not just in church, but practice them in all of our affairs, our family affairs, our business affairs. You know, it's a program of honesty. What I've discovered, people who've been through these steps, in my opinion, and my experience, I won't even just leave it at my opinion, but in my experience are some of the most honest people on the face of the planet. So a lot of times, business deals, as a matter of fact, I got one thing I may look into, and a great place to kind of maybe go connect is in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and You know, here's a guy 25 years sober, he works the steps. He's going to be a pretty solid businessman, the kind of person you want to get a fair deal and get a good product. You know, that's the kind of thing that I want. Now, we're going to take a look again. We're going to bust down these steps 6 through 12. Starting with step 6, I'm going to read step 6. It says, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. What are character defects? Well, here's just a list of some of them. Extravagance, lust, gluttony, greed, despair, sloth, rage, envy, pride, lying, sowing discord. I think we get the picture there. And usually what my experience has been in my own life as well as the lives of others is we might be a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 in one of them, thievery. But yet that man may not be but a 1 on lust. Another man, he might be a 10 on greed. And he might be 1 on laziness. But we all have our different character defects. Some are louder in one person than they are in another. But these things create pain in our lives and the lives of others. And many times extreme pain. Okay? And we want to get rid of that. Why? God wants us to have life and life more abundantly. Okay? He wants us to have life and life more abundantly. So we need to get rid of them. So the key here, though, in step 6 is willingness. If you catch that, steps 6 and 7 go together. Basically, step 6 is I'm willing to let God remove all of these defects of character, my sins, whatever they are. And then 7 we'll look at, we just basically humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. That's step 7, just like it said from the 12-step program. Step 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. So basically, we'll look at something and it will say, me for example, in the past I was a womanizer. And as I started walking with God, I knew, and did my 4th step, I knew God wanted me to do my man-woman relationship in a different way, and that I would head towards marriage, do things His way, etc., so on and so forth. Now, that doesn't mean that that defective character just mysteriously disappeared. No, I deal with that a lot. But there's been progression. Some of the preamble in our 12-step programs and the old-timers will say this: it's progress, not perfection. So before, the old life, womanizing, ended up relationships, no trust, demons saying she's cheating on you, blah, 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 blah. Tough situation, pain in those relationships, severe pain. Then you move on, first 2 or 3 months of sobriety, still had the pornos, if you will. Okay, but then God started working on that character defect. Got rid of them about 2 or 3 months of sobriety, whatever it was, a few months. Then still having trouble looking more than I should have at women. It might be a 30-second look my first year of sobriety. Still wanting God to remove this defective character. And even today, might look about 3 or 4 seconds too long. Now, even if we talk to Billy Graham, Mr. Graham, do you have a problem anytime with lust? He'd probably say at 95 years old, Billy Graham. He'd say, yeah, you know, I looked at that woman's rear end about 1 second. Okay. Shouldn't do that, but I went ahead and confessed it to God. God, I sinned. I ask for your forgiveness, and I understand that you tell me when I do confess my sins, you cleanse me from all unrighteousness. And thank you for that, God. Now, if you get the picture, we're not going to be perfect in this life, okay? But the key is to progress, because as we progress, our wrongs or our character defects become smaller, 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 and the level of pain they create in our lives and the lives of those around us gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's the key to this step, being willing for God to take them all, and then humbly, simply asking Him, hey, God, take every one of my character defects. And I think when we honestly take these 2 steps, we do We're willing that he takes every one of them away. We don't want them, okay? We're willing for that, God, and then we pray, God, I'd love for you to take every single sin away. Every single wrong that I do, patterns that I do, take it away. Now, what's interesting is, once we've left that in his hands, he's the one that does that in his time frame. And that is key. We've taken that step. That step doesn't say become perfect. No. It says we basically become willing that he take away all of our character defects. And we ask him to do so. And he may take some away instantaneously. He may take some of them as we work on them in this life. It might be a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be. And then some, for whatever reason, only known to him, he may leave around, usually in small doses. And I think the reason he does that is if any of us humans got to where we didn't have any character defects on this earth, we'd probably be the worst human there was. Why? Because we would think we were better than everybody else. But as long as we got some little character defects, and we see a man, I'll give you an example. When I see a man who relapses time after time after time, I don't sit there and think, why can't he get this like me? No. Here's what God has trained me to do. That may be his reoccurring character defect that he's trying to get rid of and wants to desperately in his life. And for whatever reason, God's left it in his life. I got character defect. It's gotten better and better and better over time, but it's still there, one of my main ones, okay? And I sit there and think, his battle with relapse might be like my battle with my character defect. And that helps me to have compassion upon a fellow man. Not sitting there, why can't you get sober like me? I'm 20 years sober. No. That's putting a place of superiority over him. Really, like I've said before, we're all equal under God. We're all equal under God. That's when God can use us, when we're real people. But we ask God to remove our shortcomings. We just basically tell him. As a matter of fact, the big book uses this. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad, and I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go forth from here to do your bidding or your commands. Amen. That's what the prayer that comes right out of the big book. So steps 6 and 7, character defects, sins, reoccurring sins, whatever you want to call them. We become willing, and here's also key of step 6. If we aren't willing, we ask God, help me to be willing to get that character defect removed. And then step 7, we simply ask God to remove them. Now if you catch where our dependency's gone, our dependency's not on us to remove them, we've asked him to remove them. Now he may have us yoked with him doing certain things for that to be removed. That's a different thing there. But basically, steps 6 and 7, dealing with our defects of character, our shortcomings, our sins, whatever you want to call it. Steps 8 and 9. Steps 8 and 9 are called the amends steps. Here's basically what we do. Step 8 says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Say that again. Basically, we make a list of the people we've harmed. We become willing to make amends to them all. All right? So we make a list. Just to give you a couple of mine that were on the list. Tuning. The man's long dead now. But 40 years ago, I'd shoplift his store as a young teenager. And I owed that man. All right? So when I started doing my amends, and here's what's amazing, in our amends steps, it says this. There's a promises. Many meetings around here read as part of the preamble or post-amble in a meeting, meaning before the meeting actually starts, regular people meet, start talking, or before the meeting ends. Preambles before, the stuff that's read before the meeting starts, a discussion meeting, for example. Post-ambles after, but the promises, the 9th step promises, one of those promises is this. We will be amazed before we're halfway through. Now, old man Tuning, 40 years ago, I'm ripping his store off shoplifting. I start making an amends. I'm going through my amends list. For example, a couple of the first amends I made would tell my mom and my dad, You know, I apologize for the lifestyle I lived. I'm going to try to live sober from here forward, one day at a time. I know I created embarrassment in your life when you look in the little small local paper and it'd have me in there being arrested, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da. Little small towns used to do that. Every single arrest, didn't matter what it was, speeding, open container of beer, or whatever it was, you'd be in the local newspaper, local news. And what, about 12 pages. And in small towns like that, the people love to see what's going on. Now, so I had to apologize that to my parents, you know, and I basically said, my apologies to you. But anyhow, later down that amends list line, I went to him. My sponsor got me to go fairly quickly after my family amends, apologies kind of thing. And it went kind of like this. The reason we did, the man was in upper 80s then, 20 years ago, or 80s, maybe mid-80s, but anyhow, he was in his 80s. I went to him because he might pass away. Well, if he passes away, I better make sure I get the amends made before he passes away is the best way to work it. So that's why I went down there. But I explained to him, I'm working a 12-step program, part of steps 8 and 9. We call them the amends steps. I need to make amends for what I've done wrong in the past. And I told him, I said, back at that time it would have been roughly 93 or 4, probably 94 early. I was telling him about 20 years before, 74-ish, 14-year-old boy, maybe 73, 75, stealing or shoplifting in his store. And I said, sir, Mr. Tunin, I said, I want to make amends to you, and I'm willing to do whatever you think will be the right amends. He sat there, he went, wow. He says, son, I knew plenty of people. I ran my stores 60 years, 70 years. I knew there was plenty of you kids that shoplifted. I caught a few, but I knew there was many more that didn't get caught. But I knew you were shoplifting. Just couldn't catch you. And he says, you're the first one to ever come up and own up to it. I'm so proud of you, son. And he says, you're getting sober? That's a great thing. I know you're going to have a great life. And he said, I'm tight. I save plenty of money. He said, I got plenty of money, more than I'm ever going to need. He pulled his wallet out and he started flipping over $20 bills. He says, can I give you some cash to help you get and stay sober? I said, no, sir, no, sir, no, no, sir. That's not why I'm here at all. I said, thank you for the offer, but my main thing is to make amends with you. What do I need to do to make it right? He said, I tell you what, the only amends I need from you, Cloud, is stay sober one day at a time the rest of your life. That'd be a great amends to me. Don't pay me no money for what you ripped off at your shoplifting as a young teenager. Now, if you catch that, the promises said we will be amazed before we're halfway through making the amends. All right? We'll be amazed. I was amazed at what happened when that man started flipping out his wallet and going to give me 20s. And of course, that's not honesty or the right thing to do. That ain't why I was there. I was there to make amends, to make right with him the wrongs that I've done in the past. He made the decision to say the best amends is for you to stay sober one day at a time the rest of your life. So far, 20 plus years, I've been making that amends. Now, step 8 and 9. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends of them all. Step 8. Step 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, that's a key second part there. I fully believe amends should be made under a sponsor, and here's why. Early in our sobriety, we're still very spiritually sick. We're getting more spiritually healthy as we go through these steps, true, but we're still very sick. And here's the kind of things I did, and I've seen others do whom I've sponsored. We made that list of people we harmed, many of us have put old girlfriends on there. I did. And the real motive was, I'd like to see what she's up to. And I could go apologize. Maybe I'll get back up with her. All right? That's the real motive. But what the sponsor knows is, everybody goes back to those old sick women, goes back to their drug of choice, which leads to only 3 places. Jails, institutions, or death. Okay? Now, we go back to those spiritually sick women, that's what's going to happen. All right? Now, so what the sponsor does, in my case, scratched every name off there. He said, here's how you're going to make amends to all those old girlfriends. Stay out of their life, period. Stay out of life, period. That's the only amends you need to make. Stay out of their life, period. You can't do any more damage if you're with them. And then what he was really saying too, give yourself a chance to get more spiritually healthy. You won't want to be with them, because you'll be a changed man. You'll become the spiritually right man, and God will bring you the spiritually right woman. All right, but steps 8 and 9. Here's some of the things. You caught that second part in the 9th step. Except when to do so would injure them or others. Many times we hear stories of somebody who, let's make it, they've been married 30 years, he got sober 3-4 months ago, he's working through the steps, 9th step, and he brings up the subject, I cheated on my wife. Now, the big book talks about this, and of course, here's how I would do it with anybody I sponsored, and I would even recommend something like this. If they've got a pastor or a minister or a priest at their church, let's get him plugged in on this potential amends, number one. Let's get the sponsor plugged in, and we're going to be praying about it. And in some cases, here's basically what the big book paints. Does the wife, in general, know that you were out screwing off on her? If so, probably go apologize. Honey, in the past, you know I've been unfaithful, and what I'm going to do now, a lot of it was tied up with my alcohol/drug abuse, and I'm going to stay sober one day at a time. I'm, with God's help, going to work on being a faithful husband to you. Now, that's probably the proper amends there. But let's say the other side of the coin is the wife has no clue. I believe me and a minister would say this: your amends is not to go tell her that you did wrong. Your amends will be this: from this day forward, you live as a faithful husband, with God's help, of course. And the reason being, if he was to go back and tell her about the affair, it would tear her up. More harm would be done than had already been done. And if he's going to stay so faithful from that point forward anyhow, you see the benefit of not tearing her life up. The mission of this step basically is this: go out and repair the damage of the past. That's basically what the mission of this step is. Go out and repair the damage of the past. Us alcoholics and addicts, we've done a lot of damage in people's lives. And I really like what the big book uses as an analogy of that. We're like tornadoes that have ravished through the lives around us. Kind of like a tornado. Leaves a lot of damage. Tons of damage. But the key is, of course, we got to get out there and repair that damage. We got to get out there and repair that damage. Tornadoes come through, my friends in the Midwest will notice, and we get some down in North Carolina pretty powerful too. Not like y'all do, but when they do come through, there's a lot of repairing to be done. Same way with the lives of an alcoholic or an addict. We need to get out there and make those reparations. And they take many forms, but working under the guise of a sponsor, working them with the context of the big book. If you're a man of faith in Christianity, for example, working them with your minister, your pastor, your priest, whatever the case may be. That's the proper way to do amends. Now, amends generally ain't a one-day gig. As a matter of fact, amends is going to be a lifelong process. Just like Mr. Tuning, Jeff Cloud, if you'll just stay sober one day at a time, that's making amends to me. That's making it right with me. And of course, Jeff Cloud staying sober one day at a time. He has so far the rest of the life to today. And I believe by God's grace, it'll be one day at a time the rest of my life, however long he has for me to be here on this earth, in this body. Okay. Now, with that being said, that kind of gives us an overview of steps 8 and 9. What I'd like to share with you now is this. Some guiding principles in making amends are, number 1, do them under the guidance of a sponsor. I've mentioned that. 2, ask God for strength and direction to do the right thing. 3, don't do an amends if it's subject to cause more harm. And number 4, again, regarding the sexual marriages, affairs, that kind of thing, sexual issues, sexual affairs, get wise counsel of a sponsor and other godly people. Now, sometimes the people we have done wrong can't be seen. And the big book says there's one way to do it. Let's make it grandma. We did her wrong. We stole her family heirloom back when we were 15. We're getting sober at 40. And she's been dead 10 years. Well, we can't physically go see her and sit down and talk to her and say, here's what I did wrong, my apologies to you, I'm going to try to stay sober one day at a time, I'm going to do anything I need to do, Grandma, to make it right with you. Now, how would that look? Well, Grandma's in a grave, all right? So it might look like this. The big book says, those who we can't see, we send them a letter. How do you send somebody an engraved letter? You write the letter, and maybe you go sit beside the grave, and you read the letter. Grandma, years ago, I stole the family heirloom. That was mixed up with all my thievery. I did wrong in the past. And to make an amends to you, now, with God's help, not only am I not going to be a thief, I'm going to turn around and be a giver in this world. In other words, I'm going to be a helper in this world instead of a herder in this world. And that's my amends to you. You might take a big lighter, burn the piece of paper there, let it go to ash, don't burn your hands or hand. Let it drop, let it fall, let it burn right there. You just did an amends with somebody who can't physically be there with you. All right, so that's steps 8 and 9. What I'd like to turn to next, step 10. Step 10, and it reads this way. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So really that's kind of like a two-prong thing. We're going to do a personal inventory, number one. Number two, if we're wrong, we're going to promptly admit it, okay? We're going to do a spot inventory, if you will. This could happen several times during a day. Generally should happen at least once a day. The Big Book talks about this at the end of our day at night. Look back upon our day as we lay down. What were some of the good things that went on today? Hey, Jeff Cloud, good thing that'll go on today? Filming a DVD that hopefully will go out to the nation and help plenty of people getting and staying sober. Get the plumbing fixed for his people at his house. They're able to use it. They need that. They need the water on, okay? Those are good things that we got, good inventory. There may be some bad things, thoughts. That's an inventory. What can I do to help get rid of it? What can I do to partner with God to get rid of it? God, help me to get rid of these bad thoughts I'm having. And maybe to pick up positive things. Maybe a Bible, read it, meditate on it. Maybe the Big Book, read it, meditate on it. Think godly thoughts. He brings the seasons. And as I get in life, I'm now 54 years old, I'm in a season, maybe the latter summer kind of thing, of a season of life. There's still a fullness to life, but yet fall isn't far away. This starts sagging, things like that. But what I'm seeing is of course, hey, this is a great way that God tells us we ain't going to be here in these bodies all of this life. It's going to change. It's going to change. One day we'll pass, okay? But my point being, we continue to take personal inventory. And then, of course, when we're wrong, we promptly admit it. Now, here's what I typically try to do. If I'm wrong in my thought life and haven't harmed anybody else, I'll admit it to God. God, I shouldn't be thinking like that. Help correct my thinking. I don't go up to a person and say, I was thinking this about you. No. That could harm them further. Man, this is a nut sitting here, blah, 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 whatever the case is. No, I'm not going to do that. But if I harm somebody else, maybe I'm too sharp with a child when I correct them. Come back to them 2 hours later, the Spirit of God still convicting me, you were too sharp. So I go back, hey, what I said was right, but how I said it was wrong. My apologies to you. I should have been more kinder when I told you how to change this behavior that's going to help you down later on in your life, blah, blah, blah. But I think you kind of get the picture. So step 10, we continue to take personal inventory. Those spot inventories, I call it, could be many times during the day. The Big Book says this: if we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear. That means, for example, if I get all snarled up, let's do this. Let's say, man, I'm in traffic. I need to be somewhere else. I can't believe blah, 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 blah. All right, what is that? Resentment? No, that's not a grudge per se. Fear? There's no fear associated with it here. Selfishness? Yeah, maybe so. Because I'm supposed to be where I'm at, and this is holding me up. That's selfish, all right? What if I do this? What if I say, God's allowed this to happen for a reason, and let me just see what God might do. Hey, God, what do you want me to do right now? And God might say, have you looked out there at those trees I've created? Have you looked at the birds? Have you seen the paintings I do in the sky? And we start looking at some of that. Wow. Now all of a sudden, instead of being frustrated because traffic's backed up, we're looking at some beautiful things in the clouds that God has done some artwork, which, by the way, will only be there that one time for that 1 second or maybe that 1 minute. And then poof, there's different artwork done. He's always got new artwork coming, kind of thing. But my point being, hey God, I shouldn't get so twisted up about something I can't control. Traffic backing up, wreck up ahead, whatever it might be. But that kind of helps us take a personal inventory. When we're snarled up, when we're disturbed, when we're afraid, when we're grouchy, whatever the case is, there's something going on. That's when we need to take an inventory. Get rid of the bad and let's replace with some good. Okay, the same way inventory's done at Buy Low or Walmart or wherever you get your food at. Same way. All right. Here's what we do when these kind of things crop up. We ask God. Here's number one. We ask God to remove them at once. Hey, God, take away this grudge. Take away this fear, whatever it is. 2, we discuss it with someone immediately. I got to snarl up. I got self-centered and I did this. Sorry, honey. As a matter of fact, we might even talk after, even apologize to the kids, but we might tell the wife, I screwed up a little bit today, honey. I said what was right to the kids, but how I said it was wrong. I kind of scared them as my voice got too loud. And she goes, well, that's all right, honey. We all mess up every now and then. What's just happened is I'm getting some cleansing there. It's almost like a little mini 5th step. See, the enemy would like to just shut up about it, don't say anything. Let's cover it up, make like it didn't happen, and then it would eat at us. It'd eat at our soul. But when we get it out there, apologize to the person and then also do the other part. It's amazing what goes on. The third thing we can do when we see these things is make amends if we've harmed someone. All right, and number 4, turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Turn our thoughts to someone we can help. When we're thinking about helping others, we're out of self, and that's the best place we can be. I'm going to say that again. When we're thinking of helping others, we're out of self, and we're in the best place we can be. That's why if you ever think about it in your life, the happiest, most joyful people, and the same thing's true in my life that we've seen, are those who serve others. Could be grandma. Grandma Wise grandma. A guy goes to her, Grandma, I need $10. What do you need $10 for, sonny? Well, I'm going to get some food. Grandma knows this guy's been doing dope. He's been, go get his rock of crack, $10 rock. He's been buying them left and right. She ain't going to give him no $10. Why? She knows what his real need is. Yeah, he needs to eat. Sonny, sit down, let me fix you something to eat. He also needs to be sober, so she ain't going to give him $10 for the rock. She's a giver, but she's joyful. Honey, you sure ought to let the Lord take control of your life. It's much better. And she loves him. And he knows deep down inside she's full of joy. Bad situations can come. She still knows everything's all right deep down inside. She may not like the situations because they're bad, but she knows deep down inside, and she shows that. All right? Why? Because she's not all about self. She's about others. Okay? But that's number 4 on that thing. Now what I want to do, that was step 10. We want to turn and talk a little bit about step 11. Step 11, which says this: sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. Okay? We're going to improve our conscious contact with God. Now, how are we going to do that? Prayer, meditation are 2 keys. Now, if you remember back in our DVD, I think about 3 or something like that, we talked about spirituality. And I went over prayer and meditation at length. So I'm not going to go back over those, but all I'm going to say is this, is that's how we improve our conscious contact with God. How we hear from Him in our spirit. What is the next right thing to do? And that doesn't come naturally to us early in sobriety. It is something we have to practice. Just like back in my day, Michael Jordan, great basketball player. Michael Jordan didn't get great by just sitting around on the sofa eating potato chips. Probably one of the hardest practicers there's ever been in the NBA was him. Many people don't notice. They had their regular NBA practices at the Chicago Bulls, and most of the time he had an hour, hour and a half with like a Scottie Pippen working on something before practice, and then working with a Dennis Rodman on rebounding after practice for an hour and a half. Practice, practice, practice. Game film, practicing how he's going to guard somebody, etc., so on and so forth. The same way with us with our spiritual ability. We got to continue to practice to get better. And prayer and meditation are the legs that carry us in that walk. Okay? Prayer and meditation are the legs, two legs, that carry us in that walk of improving our conscious contact with God. Okay? Improving our conscious contact with God. So, step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. Now watch here, praying only for two things: knowledge of His will and the power to carry it out. We're going to pray for two things basically. I need to know what your will is, God, and I need for you to give me the power to carry it out. Now you wouldn't believe how many people try to live in God's will with just knowledge of His will. It don't work. Knowledge by itself is no good. We got to have the power from Him to carry it out. Okay? And that's key. That's what I call double dependency. I got to know what you want, and I got to have your power to carry it out. Jeff Cloud knew for a long time, really, if you boiled it down, does God want somebody sober or not? Yeah, sure. Did Jeff Cloud stay sober? No, not for 20 plus years. He never asked God for the power to carry it out. One day, working that third step, he knew God's will, stay sober, and he surrendered his life to God to be the power that would keep me sober. Okay? So that's key. I need to know what your will is, God, and I need the power to carry it out. Somebody might be heavy in debt. They can find out it's God's will not to be in debt. As a matter of fact, God says the debtor is slave to the lender. Now, nobody needs to be in slavery, and He's talking about bondage. There's financial bondage if somebody's in debt. Okay, and the people have been there and say, yeah, Mr. Cloud, I know what you mean. Now, we have to depend on Him for the power to carry it out. Now, His power may come in a million different ways. He puts somebody in our life that we hear about who knows finances, and they know what one needs to do to get out of debt. Here comes the power of being through them as we implement it, doing what they say, because God's speaking through them and He gives the power to walk out of the bondage of being in debt. It could look a million ways, but those are key. You got prayer and meditation, step 11, that improves our conscious contact with God, and we only really pray for two things: knowledge of His will and the power to carry it out. Knowledge of His will, the power to carry it out. Many people will pray things like this: God, give me $1 million and I'll give it away. Well, wait a minute. How much giving are you doing when you're making $10 an hour? Well, I ain't giving nothing. What makes you think you're going to get $1 million and you're going to give it away? Whoa, that's eye-opening. Well, no. A better prayer would be this: God, I know it's your will to be a giver. Now, you know I don't have much money, but give me the power to be a giver. And what starts happening is that person may volunteer. They're in sobriety, former gang member, but they've left that life behind. And they may volunteer 8 hours a week on a couple of 4-hour sessions on the weekend, helping youth to avoid the street lifestyle that's going to tear their lives apart. That's a giver. And he ends up walking in a blessed life, much more blessed than the vast majority of millionaires and billionaires are, if they haven't got God as number one in their life. Okay? Now, so 11, sought through prayer and meditation, improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Step 12. Step 12. Carry the message and practice the principles. Carry the message and practice the principles. Here's how it said as the step was originally written. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, stop right there. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and if you remember in step 5, we had the promise that we begin to have a spiritual experience. So when we do step 5, we begin to have the spiritual experience. And then, boom, step 12 says, having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps. Where does the spiritual experience come from? Steps 5 through 12. Boom, there they are. You'll have a spiritual experience that they're talking about, a spiritual awakening, if you will. It says 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message. What message are we talking about? That this spiritual awakening has changed my life radically. Not only have I left behind my drug or my alcohol of choice and able to stay sober, I've launched out into the greatest life imaginable, far beyond anything I could imagine. It's so good. And here's how I did it. And that's how we carry the message, help another alcoholic along. Carry the message, tell somebody about our spirituality and what's going on in our life. Man, I have pure peace when I had a heart attack. Looked like I was going to die. That everything was all right, no fear. Now I tell you what, that didn't happen to everybody. That was one of the promises that come true in my life by having worked the steps. And I tell people about that if they ever talk about fears and how they can leave us as we work these steps. All right. Now, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to other alcoholics or addicts, and then to practice these principles, or if you want to call them steps, but principles that we've learned. We try to practice them in all of our affairs, not just in sobriety and in that room of AA or NA or whatever, or at the church, but we practice these in all of our affairs. You know, step one, its underlying theme is really honest. Get honest, step one. Am I an alcoholic? Let's get honest and say I'm one. Because until I do, I can't solve anything until I admit there's a problem. All right? That's an underlying principle, honesty. Now, businessman, let's be honest with people. Let's be honest with people. Renter calls up, Mr. Cloud, I'm having problems here with the toilet or whatever it is. I'm going to get off the phone. I'm going to call my plumber. All right? Now, what goes on then? I get off the phone. I better be calling the plumber if I'm practicing these principles in all my affairs. Hey, plumber says I can't make it for 2 days. I pick up the phone. I call the renter. Sorry, the plumber I got's 2 days out. Can you maybe do this to make it by? Let's cut the valve off on that half bath toilet, and can you use the full bath till he gets over there? Yes, I can. All right. That is honesty. Okay. That is honesty, and we're practicing that in all of our affairs. Honesty. And I think you've seen it probably in these DVDs. I doubt seriously you've seen teachers be as forthcoming and honest about their own lives as I have. You know, people will tell you about their past, their womanizing, or 2 dozen arrests in the past, but I don't care about that because I'm using it to help others. And if it can help anybody else, I bring it on with me, okay? But my point being, we practice these principles in all of our affairs. Now, part of what goes on there is, you know, it said we tried to carry the message to other alcoholics or addicts. The Big Book says it this way: nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. NA could say it like this: nothing will so much ensure immunity from drugging as intensive work with other addicts. And that's talking about recovering addicts. It's an insurance card. It's a trump card. It works when nothing else does. When we're focusing on helping those others, we can't live in self. When we don't live in self, we don't go back to our drugs and our alcohol. Okay? So it is a practical experience has shown that, working hard with others. It helps a million different things. Me, for example, coming out of that lifestyle of womanizing from the past, I get sober, I need to leave that behind. It was tough, no doubt it was tough. What did I do? After I was working through these steps, I said, okay, I was 4 months sober, and I started realizing, man, that is tough. The Big Book even says it this way: if sexual stuff's a problem, throw yourself harder into helping others. Woo. Okay, well, there's tons of people out there, and I started sponsoring people, and they'd call at night, and I'd share with them what I did, working through the steps, etc., so on and so forth, and that other stuff just kind of faded away. Now, how can we carry the message? I love what the Big Book says. Simply lay out the spiritual toolkit that has worked for you. Simply lay out the spiritual toolkit that has worked for you. Here's the wrench. I used it to fix the pipe. Spiritually, here's prayer. Praying only for knowing His will and the power to carry it out. I know He wants me sober. There's the wrench. Here's the ratchet. And He gave me the power by the people in AA, in the meetings, in the rooms, telling me these same things at least 5 times every meeting. Get a sponsor, work the steps, keep coming back, you know, all those kind of things. I've laid out that spiritual toolkit. Me, for example, I've found that I seem to understand God a whole lot better, for me, by reading the Bible and doing it daily, multiple times a day actually, and meditating on what it says. You know, that's a spiritual toolkit for me, but it says share that freely, because I can't share something I ain't done, and not effectively. But stuff that I've done, my experience, my strength, my hope, that's all I can give you. That's all I can give you. And it worked. And not just mine, but you're going to get that commonality that worked through tons of us. Get out of self and let God control. People do that, they stay sober. Get out of self, but quit letting self run life, and let God control. So there we have it. Steps 6 through 12. We've completed Sobriety, DVD 8 of 8. And if this is the only track that you will see, the Sobriety track, for example, make sure you got the contact information. Call for any God-honored needs when out. We really believe at Crossroads we can help you anywhere in the nation. Jobs, safe, sober places to stay, other needs. We really believe we can help you anywhere in the nation. As I leave you, as I always do, we've been blessed. Let's go be a blessing.